All right, our next section and our new segment for those of you that maybe missed the last couple of segments is AI Navigators. And each week we're going to take a little look at something that's happening in terms of practical use and impact for our colleagues in MOPS as it pertains to AI and the influence and impact that it can have. So this week we have 6 best practices for AI transparency in marketing. And this comes from HubSpot. So we want to give a little bit of a call out to them. We've been talking about AI principles and guidelines on the show the last couple of weeks. And last week, HubSpot, probably because they were listening to Launch Codes, released a series of best practices for AI transparency themselves. And there's a couple of points here. AI transparency is the practice and principle of making AI systems understandable and interpretable to humans. And transparency in AI isn't just about technology. It's aligning AI goals with organizational value, ensuring stakeholder interests are met, and building a culture of openness and accountability. And that's a direct quote from the HubSpot article. And in the article, they outlined 6 best practices. I'm just going to quickly run through the titles here of their 6 best practices, and then you and I can dive in, Matt. But first they say, define and align AI goals. Second, choose the right methods for transparency. Third, prioritize transparency in AI lifecycle. 4, continuous monitoring and adaptation. 5, engage a spectrum of perspectives. And 6, foster a transparent organizational culture. So there's a lot here, and what we love this pylon in terms of if there are more people talking about this, we recognize that it's an essential time for organizations to start to think through things. So what is your first impressions of this, Matt?
Yeah, and this might be a little nitpicky, but I think one of the things that stands out to me is I would have, number 6 there, foster a transparent organizational culture around that. I'd have that much higher in the list, probably right after define your goals. I think that, setting the tone for an organization and how everyone's using it, I don't want to say secretive, but being conscious of being open with what you're doing and how you're doing it. Both that's great for like just learning within the organization, but avoiding those conflict of interests. I think that needs to be higher up on this list for me.
Or maybe it's something that kind of spans all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is, transparent organizational culture isn't something that happens overnight.
Mm-hmm.
You either kind of espouse that value or you don't. And this making it number 6, I agree, is kind of wonky when maybe it could be one of those things that help lead to this. But being transparent culturally in terms of what's happening with AI is really important today.
Yeah, definitely. What's your take on defining and aligning AI goals? Because I feel like you have to be so broad when you're aligning your goals, and then there's such, for individual use cases, right? You almost need tiers of aligning your goals.
I think what becomes a no-brainer, if there's a use case that aligns with what's happening today, then, and what your mission is, well, then that becomes a no-brainer, okay? But I think when we start to look at the macro AI connecting to mission and values, I think the key piece there is the values and understanding the alignment between your organizational values. And, we talked about this, I think, last week, where they're kind of, I think there are 3 types of ways of that organizations can look at AI use. One, it can be kind of open, do whatever you'd like, try and see what you can do. Let's find ways to work better, more efficient, do cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, I want to improve every single use case before it's executed or even attempted. And then there's a huge span in between. And so your value alignment is going to be tied to what your tolerance for risk is. And maybe that's where we get into the challenges with Google. With 100,000 people, their tolerance for risk is maybe not the same as 700 people. But when we look at this, I think I actually really strongly believe that there are organizations that there's so much at stake that they shouldn't just be. They couldn't risk allowing people just to have free reign and do what they want. So I think there's some connectivity there to what your values are as an organization and what the risk benefit reward is. I think that's another thing that we're going to talk about in future weeks. But this idea of, if we're going to have risks declining over time and we're going to have benefits increasing over time. And when those benefits transverse that risk curve, and we have that tipping point where we move into the benefits starting to greatly exceed the risk, that's going to be a whole new era for organizations, because the use cases are going to be so impactful that you can't ignore it. But we're just still curving up on what we're seeing as the benefits and impacts that AI can have. Helping you write an email isn't enough. Like that's not it. But I'm only being a little bit facetious in that it can do so much more than that. But that's not going to make you transform your organization overnight. It's got to be some greater impact, higher use cases.
Right. If you're in that high risk category, you don't need to maybe be the front runner, be who's doing all this new amazing stuff with AI. You can sit back and see how other companies approach this. Play it a bit safe, and with less risk. Yeah, have some fun and see what you can do.
Or I think another smart way is you create a mini lab. If you're a large organization, you have the resources to assign a few people to an AI lab where they can be presented with different use cases to kind of experiment and try around, but they actually understand the parameters around it and walls that they need to set up so nothing crazy or bad takes place.